Before we get into today's paper, I just felt it appropriate to bring in a quote that is one of my favorite quotes from a paper that I read in the past year, and it's from The Key Role of Mitochondrial Function in Health and Disease, and this is from Inigo San Milan. You guys may know him from the Peter Thiel podcast, where he's one of the guys that put Zone 2 training as this really viral trend that's going on in fitness right now. So this is straight from the abstract, and it's just brilliant. It says, finally, physical activity is a canon evolutionary characteristic of humans that remains embedded in our genes. The normalization of a lack of physical activity in our modern society has led us to the perception that exercise is an intervention. However, physical activity remains the modus vivendi ingrained in our genes, and being sedentary has been the real intervention and collateral effect of modern societies. So just think about the brilliance of this statement. You guys know that I am a huge proponent of exercise and physical activity, and we always think of physical activity as being this intervention that we have to give to people in order to make them healthier and to feel better. But this implies that we have to force people in order to get moving instead of thinking in the opposite direction, which means that we were actually designed to move all the time. All this stuff that is inside of our cells, inside of our mitochondria, is destined to move in order to function properly. And when we take away that physical activity and take away that physical movement, we are operating out of accordance of our genetic destiny. And I just love this idea of flipping the script. Instead of thinking that exercise is the intervention that we need to give to people, it's this idea that what we have created in modern society has actually been this grand experiment that has been turning humans from these people that have been super physically active for thousands and thousands of years into these creatures that are very sedentary and living outside of the scope of what our genes have been destined to do. So that brings us to this paper. It's called The Effect of Experimentally Induced Sedentariness on Mood and Psychobiological Responses to Mental Stress. And this is a paper that I found on Twitter that actually looks at this idea of imposing sedentary behavior into people that are already active. The study took 46 people, and it was a randomized crossover design, meaning for 2 weeks, these active, healthy people were forced to become sedentary for 2 weeks, while the control group was allowed to do whatever they wanted under their normal activity levels. After 2 weeks of being sedentary, the group switched over, and then they looked at what happened to each group after the forced 2 weeks of sedentary behavior. They monitored activity using activity monitors to make sure that the people that were in the sedentary group were not doing any extra physical activity. There were statistically significant changes in levels of anxiety, anger, fatigue, and confusion in the people that were put into the sedentary group, while the control group had no statistically different changes. They also did a psychological stress test where they also showed that when people were sedentary, they had a reduced recovery from a stressful incident compared to people that were allowed to go through their normal types of physical activity. Lastly, they also took some blood biomarkers. So they looked at a cytokine called IL-6, which is one of our main inflammatory biomarkers, and that people in the sedentary group had higher levels of these inflammatory cytokines during this stress response compared to people that were allowed to have their normal physical activity. These results probably aren't surprising. We know that if you take healthy people that are active and you force them to not be active anymore, that they're going to have mental health outcomes as a result of that. This is because healthy movement drives mitochondrial function, and healthy mitochondrial function drives a healthy brain. And if we rob people of that movement, then they're going to have these mental health and brain health ramifications as a result of it. So why is it so hard to get more people to embrace more physical activity? It's one of the things that we've noticed in our office is that just through the process of getting care in our office and forcing people to become more active as part of the rehab protocols, a lot of them just feel better as a result of that. And a lot of these people that are otherwise healthy just didn't realize how crappy they felt mentally and how much of a grind they were going through mentally before they started to bring physical activity back into their life again. We all get bogged down by life's stresses and life's pressures, and it feels like if we just got some time to just sit back and relax, we would just feel better, but it's just simply not the case. We need outlets to use our stored energy, because if we hold on to that energy, then it seems to have negative consequences for our mitochondrial function and therefore our brain function.